discussion of Future AI Insights, a monthly newsletter exploring cutting-edge future trends and compelling AI stories to supercharge your business. In today's discussion, we have with us Kai Wang, CEO at AI Ager, and an expert in leveraging generative AI in business. Kai, it's great having you with us today.
Hi, George. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Tell us a bit about yourself and what you do, what's your specialization as far as AI is concerned and its use in business.
Sure. Thank you for this opportunity to talk to you and the audience. So, I am the CEO of AI Asia, and basically we want to help organizations innovate. And this is done through infusing two things. One is to add creative thinking in the business functions. The other one is adding the generative AI component. So there are two things we focus on right now. One is adding, for example, ChatGPT and related AI tools and use that for sales and communication purposes. So I think ChatGPT is a great tool for communication, and also communication is a huge part of sales, right? So I think they can play a very important role there. The second aspect is that we help organizations innovate, and that's combining two components. One is how to promote your team to think more creatively and to come up with an innovative solution. But then again, like I said earlier, it is adding the AI's capability to it. So we all know that we can use AI tools to generate ideas. And the tricky part is how can you combine both, combining the people's capabilities and AI's capability in helping organizations innovate. Right.
Okay, that's great. So let's start first of all from the sales function and how can you use ChatGPT or any other generative AI tool to improve sales?
Right. So ChatGPT is a great conversation tool, right? It's a great tool for language. And it turns out that all the businesses are about language, right? So especially if we think of sales, the vast majority of things we do in sales is about language. And ChatGPT happens to be one of the most powerful language tools. So there are many different aspects to it. So starting from, let's say, the different stages of sales, we start with prospecting, like identifying potential customers, identifying leads, and then we need to do outreach. We need to reach out to them, and we need to set up meetings. We prepare for meetings, and if it goes well, we can identify the needs, and we can make proposals, and then there's negotiation and closing, and so on. So there are all different stages in the sales process, and turns out they are all about language, right? So again, whenever you need to use language, especially when you need to have communication that is customized, which is pretty much true for all kinds of B2B sales, then ChatGPT is very, very useful. So it can do many different things. So it can help us with researching. For example, with internet access, we can use AI tools to collect and analyze large amount of information fast. It can help us to do data analysis. It can help us to generate the ideas. It can help us customize communication, right? So for example, when you sell to company A versus you sell to company B, you have to say it differently, right? You cannot just use the same kind of conversation and hope that can work. It doesn't, right? So we really need to not only get the information about your prospect, but also use that information to customize how you want to talk to prospects. So the customizing aspect is really important, as well as the writing documents, right? So making proposals and so on. All those things need to be customized, and all those things you want to do them in a high quality way and in a efficient way. And it turns out that ChatGPT is really great in boosting both aspects, in boosting the efficiency, like you can do it fast, and boosting the quality in terms of you can produce content or have conversations that is customized and effective.
Now that we have seen some evolution of ChatGPT, especially in other generative AI tools, of course, but now we have 4.0, before that the fourth version, and so on and so forth. Did you see any significant advantages by using the latest versions as opposed to the previous one, the first version that was released before 1.5 years ago?
Right. I think there has to be some advantages because they are, the OpenAI, those people are pretty smart, right? They develop new models. And of course, people are adopting new models. There's got to be some major advantage of it. Now, how much of an advantage there is in your specific context, well, obviously depends on what you are doing. Now, I think a very major advancement of the current GPT 4.0 is the multi-model capability, right? So it can take a visual, it can take a picture, or it can look at something and actually have a conversation about it, and it can also respond to a user in ways that has emotion component to it. So I think there are some advantages, maybe not as much as in some areas, but if you think about sales, so some things that you can do now, which you cannot do a year ago, might be that now you can have a realistic conversation with the AI, right? And because of that, now you can actually practice your conversation in advance, in actual speech, right? Not just in typing. Now you can actually talk to your AI and as if that's a real sales conversation. I think that's something that is relatively new and it's also very promising.
ChatGPT and all generative AI tools have been accused of hallucinating and sometimes providing false answers in the most convincing way. And that's a problem. Have you seen that as a challenge when trying to use these tools in improving the sales function and sales as a process?
Right. I think it's definitely one challenge. Now it's definitely something you need to take into consideration. So I think it's mostly a problem when you do researching, right? So in other words, if you have a lot of information and you want to give AI for it to summarize, to analyze, and for it to develop a report, that's where it's going to be a bit of a problem because you are not 100% sure whether it's true. But here's the thing, for one, the AI tools are getting better and better of providing a source, providing citation, right? So for example, well, ChatGPT is getting better, but Microsoft Copilot, it does have a list of citation or a list of references you can check. So if there's anything important in your analysis, you probably want to double check that. For example, if there's a key figure, key number, like let's say 20% of the market is, there's a trend that 20% of your customers are adopting something, right? If that 20%, is that true? You probably want to go back to the original reference and double check that. You don't want to take something at face value. So that's one. The other thing is that when you want to customize your conversation or you customize your communication, such as emails, you may want to double check for key facts. But I think it's less of a concern because if you are careful in your research stage, meaning the information you collect is accurate, then based on that information, when you do that, when you customize your conversation, it's relatively less likely to hallucinate. Okay, so in other words, for example, if you know that the number is true, that indeed 20% of your customers are having a new trend, and then when you translate that into an email, it's less likely to come up with some new number during that email message.
So your overall evaluation, is it that these tools are indeed working in practice or not? And if they do, is there any specific application or series of applications, group of applications where they excel?
Oh, right. Yeah. I think one aspect that the ChatGPT or related tools are particularly good at. So might be the qualitative side. So I mentioned earlier that there could be hallucination, right? So if you do research, if you do data analysis, you kind of want to double check, making sure that numbers or whatever they come up is accurate. You don't want to show your customers that you just have wrong numbers. But then the qualitative side, I think the ChatGPT or similar AI tools are even better because for one, it's less likely to hallucinate and it's easier to spot anything that's not true if it's qualitative, right? So, for example, if it says that people are using AI less and less, then you know it's not true. You don't have to go back to the reference and to double check that. But the other thing is that because a lot of sales conversation or communication is qualitative, right? It's not around all numbers. And in that case, not only is it easier to spot hallucination, but also it's also more useful because oftentimes we have we need help to communicate better and to improving the communication. And ChatGPT is really great. Not only some of us may not be using English as a first language, even if we are, right? So we are not. Most people don't have 3 decades of sales experience. And what if you can just take the knowledge that AI tools have? So, for example, uh, there are different frameworks for selling, right? So like Spin or Medic or whatever. We don't have to get into the detail, but there are different sales methods. And if you are not familiar with all of them, it's pretty easy. You can just ask AI to tell you about there are different ways for sales to frame it, or there are different ways for closing, right? And those information tend to be rather accurate. I mean, they don't really hallucinate too much of those easily accessible kind of information. So they don't have so much there, and it can basically teach you or coach you, and you can get up to speed really fast of using different sales methods or different closing techniques, or let's say different persuasion techniques. And they tend to be accurate, and then they can really help us adopting those methods quickly.
I can understand the training part, and this is definitely one area where generative AI excels. But what about as far as sales is concerned? Obviously, what about discussing specific sales cases, sales opportunities? Would you do that with ChatGPT or with any other Gen AI tool and take some advice about your pricing, your sales approach, negotiation, things like that, or not?
Um, I don't know too much about pricing, which is obviously your specific area. And by the way, feel free to try it, right? Again, pricing is more of numbers, and I don't know whether ChatGPT has good sense of numbers in for pricing, especially for startup with no history or little history to depend on. But I think we can, in general, ask large language models to be specifically. We can ask them for advice, and oftentimes the advice are sound. I mean, it can be hallucinating, right? But in general, if you are in your field, you tend to know whether something is totally made up or something that is is kind of reasonable. So, for example, let's say I run into a situation. I run into a problem when I try to sell to someone and someone has an objection, right? Let's say this objection is that um, the product I have does not meet this need, so the client doesn't want it. And we can ask AI, or we can ask large language model, okay, so this is what I sell, this is what the objection is, how do I go around it? And again, the large language model could still hallucinate, but it's relatively easier to spot if it is coming up something that's not making sense. And it does come up with a lot of suggestions that tend to make sense, right? And obviously you can choose which one to follow, which one to not to follow. But it kind of help us expand our thinking as well as coming up with solutions relatively fast, right? So just take one example. If you talk about pricing, right? So if your client says that your product's okay, but the price is too much, right? And how do you go around that? And if you already have 3 decades of sales experience, you probably don't have trouble. But for most people who don't have that much of experience, you can quickly ask AI. So for example, AI may suggest, okay, you can explain that, yes, the price might look high now, but it's going to save you money in the long run, which is okay, makes sense, right? So that's something you might come up with it yourself anyways, but you could push AI to come up with some new ideas or new solutions. So that's where I think it can help a lot.
You can be very creative with pricing, by the way, and I guess this is what you're implying.
Sure.
And you need to be creative, especially when price is the issue in the end, because they need to pay the price. And talking about creativity, I understand that this is the other area where you're using generative AI to help
Right.
businesses in creating more ideas. Can you tell us more about this?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's the part that I'm also very, very excited about. And the reason being, everyone talks about that creativity and innovation is a major component, a major function in business. And people tend to talk a lot about it, but not really do much about it. Not necessarily because um, not necessarily because lack of capability. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's just that it's unclear where to start, right? Or sometimes people are so stuck in the same mode, and it's hard to challenge the old and traditional way. But here's what is good about AI. AI does not have an emotion, right? It does not have a attachment. It's not attached to your old way of doing anything, right? So you can always ask AI to expand thinking. But of course, I do want to mention that if we just ask AI for ideas in that just without any good prompting skills, it does not really give you necessarily a lot of fresh ideas, because the AI, the very nature of it, is trained to produce, probable or likely result, right? It wanted to speak, or it wanted to have output that is something that is likely to be uh, that is probable human-like output. So due to that nature, it may give you ideas not fresh. However, for one, you can always push for more ideas, and if you push for beyond the obvious ideas, you can get more. But the more important part is that we can use different prompting scales for it to give you new ideas. And it's really, well, it's good in two ways. Again, for one, it's really high speed, right? It can give you dozens or hundreds if you write a program, or thousands if you like. It can give you a lot of ideas. And then the other good part is their ideas on average are actually quite good. So there are academic studies showing that, for example, divergent thinking, which is a common creativity test. It turns out that AI's ideas they don't have many bad ideas. It's unlike humans, right? If you ask a person to generate a lot of ideas, it turns out that a lot of within that there's a lot of variation, and you have a lot of bad ideas. But AI tend to have ideas that are at least decent. They don't give you a lot of bad ideas. But it's not just that the floor is higher. Also, if we use good prompts, right, or if we include good techniques for creative thinking and use that for AI, it tends to give you also more top ideas. So, well, I know someone is doing research on that, and the preliminary data shows that if you have AI use the idea generation techniques for humans, you can use that for AI as well. It turns out that AI can generate not only more ideas, but also more high quality ideas. So I think that's very important. So maybe I'm talking too abstract here, because ideas can mean very many different things. But for your specific purpose, right, you can use a specific framework. For example, if you are coming up with ideas for, let's say, customer for a consumer product, right? And you can feed all the consumer product information to it. You can feed the customer trends, technology trends, so that it's not just generic ideas. It can make it specific to your specific need. So I think that's really a very, very good way to use it. So it's basically combining human ingenuity with AI, right? So AI alone may or may not give you good ideas, but it's combining your own thinking with AI. So for example, we need to ask good questions, right? And as a facilitator, I'm trained to help people asking better questions. And if you're asking better questions and give AI the context, then it is able to get a lot of good ideas. And in addition to generation, you can also evaluate, right? So for example, if you end up with 200 ideas, what are you going to do about it? You can hire people to go through that, and it's going to take a lot of time, right? And you could, right, define the criteria for success. What kind of ideas are you looking for? And you can tell AI about it, right? You can just give AI your criteria, and you can maybe give AI some examples of what are good ideas or what are bad ideas. Give it some examples, which we call the future learning. And once AI has that context information, maybe you can go through a list of ideas and give you a result really fast.
I have a couple of questions here regarding their ability to create new ideas and the creative capacity. And I remember a couple of things that you mentioned. First of all, that they lack emotion, obviously. And second, that they go around the average or give politically correct answers based on their training, obviously. They don't like to deviate a lot from what is considered okay globally, worldwide, or in the community, or in the training sample that they have been trained from, which is normal for AI. However, this is not normal in the creative process. The creative process, I think emotion is important because you need to have passion, at least, in order to explore new areas, new territories. So there is a disadvantage possibly there. And second, by definition, innovation and creativity has to do with non-politically correct solutions or directions, but new out of the blue directions. So is it problematic by definition and they can never be creative, or is there a workaround?
So I understand your two questions. The first one is that AI has no emotion and by its nature has no curiosity or passion towards any problem. So does that limit its utility, usefulness? And second one is that it's very constrained because it's trained to behave in ways that are polite or so, right? So maybe is that a constraint? Does that limit its creativity? Or the other way to put it is it biased by its training, right? It's sort of bound by its training data. So I think these are all very fair points, and I think maybe I need to clarify. I think I propose that I advocate that we use it for helping us, right? So I'm not saying that we use AI to replace that in creative thinking. Honestly, not only it's unlikely to happen, and even if it has that ability, I don't think it's a desirable thing in the first place. So what I mean is here AI is basically a tool, right? And the tool does not need to be perfect or better than us for us to use it. So for example, we can use the cars to move us around. We don't need cars to have emotional response or have urgency, right? We don't need cars to feel urgent for it to carry us to somewhere fast, right? It does not have to have emotional components of the car. And cars does not have to beat us in everything. Cars only need to be faster than us in a highway, right? Or on a road. Cars does not need to be better than us in climbing stairs. By the way, of course, it doesn't, right? We don't need it to be better than us to help us. We just need it to be better than us in some aspect, and we just need to be smart about when and how to use it. I think the same thing here applies for AI for creative thinking. So yes, AI has no emotion or no passion or no curiosity, but we can invent it. And because of that, we can ask questions based on our passion, based on our curiosity. We can ask interesting questions, fresh questions, questions that are original and intuitive or whichever way, right? So we can feed it with information that is we can feed it, or we can ask AI to search for information based on our curiosity or passion. Again, we are using it as a tool. We don't need it to have that emotional component. And of course, we can tell AI if emotion is important, right? So, for example, if we know that customers are solving this problem and we want to help customers solve this problem, we can tell that customers have some sort of emotional response to the problem or to the solution. Or we can ask AI to guess what customers feel, right? So either way, we can sort of feed some of that information in. And the second aspect is AI is constrained by its training, and it's constrained by its manner of being either, politically correct or being polite. And I think that's a very valid thing. By the way, I observed that Cloud, the AI chatbot by Anthropic, Cloud is more polite than ChatGPT. So in other words, if you want something, if you want to have a harsh conversation, you cannot do that with Cloud. For example, let's say I want to I want to simulate a conversation with someone, right? And I try that with Cloud, and I say, okay, act as a rude person, right? And Cloud doesn't do that. It says that I'm not able to do it. But I said, yeah, I need you to be a rude person to talk to. I need to practice that conversation. But Cloud does not allow you to do that. So yes, it's totally aligned with what you said. It is constrained by its training, constrained by its data, and so on. But again, we don't need it to be, useful in every aspect, right? So in that aspect, maybe yes, it's true. The AI cannot really, if you talk about Anthropic Cloud, it's not able to practice a conversation with a rude person because it's designed not to do that. But for creative thinking, a lot of the task doesn't involve a rude person, right? So there are some places that cannot be. There are some scenarios where it cannot be particularly useful, but for a lot of scenarios, it could be. But the other aspect is that it is constrained by its training data, right? So is it less creative? Well, yeah, it could be if you just ask questions in too simplistic way, right? So if you ask it to give me ideas about new shoe design, maybe it gives you ideas that are just not very fresh, right? Not original. But you can feed it with all kind of original input, right? So for example, you can tell it to combine two things. You combine shoes with, let's say, movies, right? Or movie themes, or come up with some shoe design ideas based on, I don't know, some movies, or based on some songs, or based on, let's say, based on colonizing Mars, right? And typically, if you design shoes, you don't think of colonizing Mars. But now I'm telling you to do that, and then I'm telling AI to do that, and it will not object it, right? It will just take your input and give you ideas, and then you can come up with something original.
So, if I understand correctly, you agree with Microsoft's positioning with Copilot and understanding that AI is here to support us, but eventually we are pulling the strings.
Right, I believe so.
So, does this create some sort of human AI symbiosis from now on, and is this a paradigm shift?
I think it is a paradigm shift. I think it's I think most people already see it this way, right? Because traditionally we kind of think of AI taking care of data, and we take care of the creative part, right? That's at least what most people think 5 years ago, right? 5 years ago, you think of AI as a machine and do repetitive and mechanistic stuff, and we people take care of emotional, creative things. But now that's not true anymore, right? Because honestly, there's an interesting feeling or a trend out there that is claiming that that's so here's a meme or here's a post I saw saying that okay, we want AI to take care of our dishes and laundry so that I can do arts and poem, and not letting AI take care of arts and music, and I do dishes and laundry, right? So that's yeah, that in that sense it is a paradigm shift. But again, here I think that the point is that I don't think AI will or should take over all the creative tasks, right? I think it's still a tool. Well, in my opinion, with my experience of large language model at least, uh, AI is still limited. So for one, AI does not have a lot of contextual understanding. So in other words, it does not really understand, for example, your company, your product, your service, your customer, and your specific challenge, right? And your specific vision. It just does not know that. And exactly because it does not know, it cannot really autonomously help you innovate. You still need to feed it all the information for it to get what you want, where you're heading. So so the number one, it does not know the context, and second, it does not oftentimes does not have deeper insight. I mean, it can generate things oftentimes superficial, but if you want deeper insight, it's tricky. Well, it's related to the first part, right? The first part is that it does not really know too much of your context, and exactly related to that, it's hard for it to generate insights that are deep. So for example, let me take an extreme example, right? Let's say you are a physicist, you are developing theories in quantum mechanics, and you can ask AI. It can give you some ideas, but they tend to be superficial, right? It does not really generate something that is you can publish, right? But it can give you some ideas or give you some food for thought, right? But it does not really have the capability to generate deeply meaningful, for example, new theories for physics, right? Or for that matter, can it generate deeply meaningful new music? I don't know. Maybe I don't know, but it's kind of hard. It still has its limits, and I don't think it's going to change in this current paradigm, uh, because if we just follow this large language model paradigm, I don't think it's going to change.
What do you think about AGI, artificial general intelligence, or human equivalent AI? Is it just around the corner, as some people claim, or not at all?
Not at all. That's my take. So obviously, number one, I can be wrong, right? So, by the way, the one thing that I learned through the years is that we cannot predict the future, right? So we did not predict the pandemic. We did not predict the large language model. Although, if you follow those signals carefully, there might be a chance some people predict, but for the vast majority of the people, we did not predict that. So number one, I cannot predict. I cannot pretend I could. But my strong opinion here is that we will not have AGI anytime soon, or maybe never. And the reason is this: machine is fundamentally different. So if we want to use a fundamentally different mechanism to replicate something complex, by its nature, it's going to be very, very difficult. So let me give you an example, right? So let's talk about something a lot less complex. Let's think about how birds fly. If you think about birds can fly, right? And by the way, for thousands of years, people want to fly as well. So there are all kinds of machines made to simulate how, well, not simulate, but to sort of replicate or resemble how birds fly, and pretty much all of them fail, right? So what has succeeded? Airplane. Airplane succeeded in flying, but it's nothing like a bird, right? It is nothing like a bird. So in a similar sense, if we want to replicate human intelligence, there may be ways to simulate it, but for one, just like airplane looks nothing like a bird, having totally different mechanism, right? So it's inherently different, and it's also very, very hard to replicate in its entirety, right? So even though we are so advanced in airplane technology, we are nowhere close to replicate how a bird fly, right? Because a bird can fly quickly or slowly, it can land on a tree branch, but none of our airplane can do that. Or I don't think our drones can do that like a bird. So it's relatively simple, and we cannot replicate it. And human intelligence is so complex, and I just don't think a machine can do that easily.
As a final question, you told me about a new book that you were reading, Phasing Our Futures. So, if you care to share some details and why is this an interesting book for business readers?
Oh, sure. And by the way, I can show the cover, right? So, facing our whoops, is it? Facing Our Futures is by the author called Nicholas Badminton. So this is a rather new book, probably published this year. This is essentially about what future is, what do they do, and the reason why I brought it up is because obviously your company is called FutureUP, right? And you talk about strategic forecasting, and I think that's totally relevant. But they do that in a qualitative way, not quantitative way. So they are thinking through the future in quantitative, in descriptive or prescriptive ways, not in terms of numbers. So there are a couple of things I learned from it, at least. Well, for one, like I said earlier, it's virtually impossible to predict the future in the long term. So if we pretend that, or if anyone pretends that they know the future, don't take it, right? Don't believe that. So what is really a good way to think of it is that there are multiple futures, not one future, but multiple futures. And depends on what we do, and depends on some things out of our control, that we may land on different futures. So it has a concept of future cone. It's the cone is like, started from one point and it expand into circles bigger and bigger. It's like a cone. So our future is like a cone. In other words, there are many different things that could happen in the future, and we need to think of it as a set of possibilities, right? And so what separated it from just regular strategic planning? By the way, all companies do strategic planning, right? How is it different? So I think a key difference that this author suggested is that we want to think in a longer term, because most strategic planning think, in the next 1, 2, 3, 4 years, right? And longer than that, people don't want to think about it. Well, for good reasons, because it's hard to predict the future. So why do we do that? So we cannot predict the future, but we can think of different scenarios, right? So in other words, there can be different possible future scenarios. And it's really nice to think in a longer term, let's say 10, 20, 30 years, and think of different possible scenarios. Think of which ones are desirable, which ones are undesirable. And then you can decide how you can avoid the undesirable and go towards the desirable. But you need to have that vision first, right? So just like you said, what if there's AGI, right? That's, in my opinion, not going to happen in the next 3 or 5 years. But people still think about it, and it is good. So even though I don't believe it's going to, emerge in a short term, it's good to have that scenario planned, sort of, right? So if, let's say, if in 5 or 10 years there is AGI, what are the consequences, right? You can think of that as a possible future scenario. Think of the consequence of that AGI. How is that going to influence your the technology, the customers? How is that going to influence your market, your company? And it's better you get prepared for it, right? So you can come up with a scenario and you actually define a plan. It doesn't have to be super detailed, but it's nice to actually think through that, so that you don't, get surprised and don't know what to do. Right. I think that's a big takeaway from that, meaning thinking longer terms, because most people don't, right? We don't really think of 20 years into the future, but I think there are benefits of doing that, and also think of things beyond the small circle, right? We may just think of our own company, our industry, our own competitors, but it turns out that things could affect you outside of this small circle. Just like OpenAI suddenly, take the whole world. And maybe you are in an industry that has nothing to do with AI, right? Maybe you are in, let's say you're in restaurant, right? You're in restaurant industry, and you wouldn't even think of, okay, who cares about OpenAI, right? But not anymore, right? If you are running a huge restaurant company, let's say if you're McDonald's, now you are seriously thinking of AI, right? So we know that some, I know Wendy's or some fast food restaurant, they are using AI tools to help take orders, right?
Actually, they did that, but not so
Okay.
successfully. They tried to use search pricing using AI, and it was a disaster. But it had to do
Okay.
not with the AI part, it was mostly the communication, at least this is the consensus, and the way that they manage things or execute on their strategy, not the strategy itself. But it became quite a viral story and not something to be proud of.
Right. It
Fortunately
evolves.
for them.
It evolves. I think there will be a lot of failures along the way, but I think overall, in the long run, it's going to be part of AI is going to be part of restaurant. I mean, at least big chain franchise restaurant, it's going to be part of it.
Definitely, yes. So, Kai, again, thank you so much for joining our discussion today and sharing all these wonderful insights. Any last words? And also, how can anyone get in touch with you?
Sure. Thank you for this opportunity, and I think honestly, I think there's something more to discuss. But if I were to add anything, so for one, uh, I think in my opinion, we are too optimistic about this notion of AGI. I don't think it's going to be achieved anytime soon. Honestly, I'm not sure it can be achieved ever. So I think at the end of the day, we still need to have human at the center of our concerns and in our desired future. I don't think that just because AI is so powerful that everything has to be centered around AI, right? So I think AI humans are still the center of it, and not only people need to design whatever AI works on. Also, we probably will need to evaluate it at the end, right? So AI can evaluate a bit of by itself, but at the end of the day, whatever AI designs is for people, right? And we probably still need to design whatever they do, and also we need to at the end we need to check the deliverable, right? So it's still a huge part of whatever we're doing. So I don't think we should exaggerate what AI can do and change the focus. So the other thing is that I think it's really important to combine the people's wisdom with AI's capability, right? So I think that's probably the key thing in all industries for the next couple of decades. So I think that's kind of summarizing what I say. Now, in terms of how it can be reached, well, for one, I have LinkedIn obviously profile, and I also have a company website where you can leave a message, or you feel free to add me on LinkedIn, by the way. So I like to meet people of similar interest. So I look forward to working with different people, and I think it's really a wonderful time to be working, and there are a lot of different possibilities, and a lot of things will fail, but I'm pretty sure a lot of things will succeed as well. Thank you, and again, thank you for this opportunity to have a discussion, and I really enjoy these wonderful questions and this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Kai, as well for this intriguing and so interesting discussion. And thanks, of course, everyone for watching our discussion with Kai. I hope you liked it. If yes, then please subscribe to our Future AI Insights newsletter, like it and share it. Again, thanks everyone for watching and Kai for accepting our invitation. Bye, everyone.
Bye.